I love that. To your stick bag, to your session room, to your recording, to your live dates. Vater, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. We're going to make this. Listen, this is take two. We're going to hit this again and make this right for sure. Thank you so much for joining me here. This is fantastic to have this kind of time to watch the fantastic passion and just sheer passion of the manufacture of these sticks and the precision that it takes to make the sticks. That's a great, great video. Again, thanks for joining. We're going to have on July 13th, we're going to bring to you, oh man, this is going to be fun. We're going to have George Sluppick here. We're going to talk about some shuffles and Memphis soul music. And we're going to have Ashlyn Shanafelt here with us, which is a phenomenal top player and an independent artist in Austin, Texas. So they'll be joining us on July 13th. We're taking next week off for the holidays, so we want you all to enjoy your holidays and be safe for sure. But this week, who we have today, right now, oh my gosh, we got some incredible pictures and some stuff here. Check this out. We have the incredible talented Brent Fitz of Slash featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators with us to share some career history, advice, and stories from his professional experience. Brent has been on the kit for Alice Cooper, Vince Neil, Gene Simmons, Ronnie Montrose, Brad Whitford of Aerosmith, and so many more. On top of the drums, he also has played bass with rock legends, the Guess Who, multi-talented. Please welcome Mr. Brent Fitz. Yeah.
Greetings from Entertainment Capital, Las Vegas. Hi, Dom.
Oh, man. Vegas, man. It's just so great that I mentioned it's like 105 degrees there right now, right?
I know, yeah. And I've only had 3 hours sleep. I was in the studio yesterday till about 2 a.m, so I'm running on fumes. But listen, off camera before we jumped on live here, you already told me what your day had already started with lessons, and I'm like, I'm so inspired, as we all are, who are big fans of yours. But geez, like how do we keep up? So anyway, I got 3 hours sleep. Let's chat and celebrate what we love.
Absolutely, for sure, Ben. And you know, when it comes to drumming and playing, I mean, you really have this incredible intensity you bring to your performances in playing in these large crowds, these arena bass. I mean, when you hit that snare drum, you hit that with every ion in your body. That's incredible.
Well, you have to have good tools too. We can talk about the sticks that require that, that velocity, but a lot of gigs. I'm not a kid. I'm 51 years old, and I started back in a small little Canadian town, but just all the gigs that I've done over the years, it's great to play a huge crowd. In the last 10 years, I think just with Slash alone, we've been to, over 50 countries. And I know you and I were talking again off camera that you yourself have been to way over 50 countries. And to get to play to a large crowd and get to play with intensity is a blessing. So yeah, I give every performance 150% because it's just so great to play music. And if there's 5 people there, I'm happy. But if there's 100,000 people there, I'm freaking out, but I'm enjoying it.
Well, you're freaking out. Sure does. It's hidden because when you play, you deliver all the time consistently, Brent. It really is amazing. But let's go back to your early days in Canada where you were in Winnipeg, correct?
Yeah, I grew up it's the middle of the country, so the climate's cold. And the good thing about I guess you could say the music community is because of the climate and the compromise is that there's a lot of good opportunity to play music because 8 months of the year it's cold and you're either a failed hockey player or you're a musician. So I really love the pedigree that came from before me as far as musicians and drummers. And, I could mention like one of the greatest rock bands that, around the world that people know might be, and they might not know specifics, but the band, the Guess Who had a hit with American Woman is from my little hometown. And I was inspired by all the great music that came before me. So, but you got to start from somewhere. So yeah, I grew up in Winnipeg, and there's a long journey after Winnipeg of a million gigs around, Canada and the country, playing with 1,000 great other musicians and inspiring artists. And then, years later in my 20s, I end up, making a huge move down to the States, down to California. That's a dream instead of reading about and seeing a place like LA on, in magazines and all my drum heroes and that. But I'm coming to you from Vegas now, as we said, and I've been here 20 years. So now I'm a Las Vegan, but I'm still a Winnipeg kid.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Still a little small town guy.
You'll never lose that for sure. But let's go back to when you started playing drums. When did you get your first kit? What sparked you into playing? And when did you get your first kit?
I think everybody that has, spoke to you and shared a little bit of, other drummers and musicians, their stories, there's always some, like a moment, maybe you're with your friends or with your parents, or you see something on television. Of course, a lot of people just before me, because I didn't have the pleasure of seeing, say, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, which influenced generations of, other musicians. But, growing up in the 70s, actually, here, you want to see? Okay, check this out. See that kit?
Yeah.
All right, that's homemade. So that was probably my original Muppets, toy drum kit that I got from, my parents seeing that my love for music. Now, just really quick, my sister and I both were piano players at 5 years old. I have one sister who's also a much better looking, more talented musician than I. And yeah, so we started on keyboards and going to group lessons, taking organ and piano, all that stuff. That photo is great because I have to really explain that my parents told me that early on at piano lessons, which was a group, like say maybe 10 people in a classroom, all sitting at an organ. And my parents said the teacher would come back and say, Brent's such a really inspiring and happy young student, but he's always wanting to show everybody else in the class he's helping them out. He's helping them play their instrument too. And they go, it's not bad. It's just everybody has to learn their stuff too. And I go, I've been kind of doing that my whole life. I'm always a cheerleader and, like rallying the troops yeah. So I was helping all the other kids out in piano class, but somehow piano lessons turn into, jamming in the basement with my best friends, which in that photo is, my sister's in the photo and my best friend across the street, Brad, who played guitar, and my parents got me a drum kit. And then, I'm thankful that my folks also realized that, okay, so that photo that's my first drum kit. I think I'm 10 years old in that photo. And the great thing was my parents recognized passion and love for music early on, and they gave us the piano lessons, but I also wanted to be a drummer. And, it was probably a lot of things I saw on television. Like I mentioned the Muppets. Remember the Muppets show always had inspiring music guests, probably the first time I saw Buddy Rich was on the Muppet Show. And for some people from before, they would have, of course, seen him in a jazz club or something. But I grew up in the 70s. I saw Buddy Rich and Alice Cooper and all that on a TV show, and that was very influential. So yeah, my parents got me a drum kit, but the deal was I had to take lessons. So we took lessons on piano, and I'm so thankful my parents were like, look, we'll get you the drums. We'll find someone in town to get you lessons. And what they did was my teacher was, and the cool thing was I had two teachers in one. I had a father and son, Gareth Smith, and his son, Vaughn Smith. And Vaughn was a few years older than me. He was probably in his late teens when I started lessons. But the cool thing was I had Gareth would teach me, and I had to, go through all the rudiments and styles of music that maybe I wasn't listening to with all my friends, which probably was Van Halen and Kiss records. But Gareth influenced me and opened my music palette to jazz music and all the different styles of music in between rock and jazz. So, and then his son was, Vaughn, was giving me all the stuff that hey, Vaughn, I want to learn, this rock song, Zeppelin or something. So I'm really glad I got lessons, and I'm glad my parents saw that and they put me through it. And I have to give a shout out to music teachers because, and Dom, you're an excellent motivator and teacher, and it's so inspiring. I'm so glad that I got lessons, and it's sort of created my palette now for loving all styles of music.
Absolutely. So what in the lessons, what was happening in the lessons? Were you learning rudiments? Were you learning reading? Was there hand tape? What was happening in the lessons?
Yeah, luckily, I only knew what I would listen to with my friends and on records. And at least having someone guide you and teach you along, you get to the end of the race a little bit faster. So I just wanted to play as much, I just, as a kid, you're just so, you're like a sponge. You want to absorb everything. So I was just obsessed with all, I remember getting those first issues of Modern Drummer and reading every page and just being fascinated and going through all the I wanted to learn how to read music, and not everybody wants to learn how to read music, but again, I had a lot of that early influence with melody instruments, with piano as well. So I was just completely consumed. So it was great having and again, the father and son influence of two different, I kind of got two teachers at once. So I got double the education. And it was early on. I was 10 years old. And, by the time I was 15, I had really, spent 5 long years studying, weekly. And my parents would drive me to these lessons across town in the cold weather. We're talking about Winnipeg, and, God, I owe my parents for forever, for that.
That really is a blessing for sure, to have that level of influence and that foundation that you had. So now you're playing with different bands, you're doing your things. And at what point did you decide to make the move to LA?
Well, after lessons and really quick, I got a chance to, after having lessons, there was a drum store in Winnipeg called Drums Unlimited. It was the community where everybody met, all the drummers. That's not as common anymore, to go to an exclusive drum shop. Most stores are, where you have all the instruments in one. But to go to an exclusive drum shop was very, very inspiring. So I got to give a shout out. The store is not there anymore, but Drums Unlimited in Winnipeg was where I got my first, I remember. Now, I bought my first drum kit from Garris, my teacher, my parents, and that was that Yamaha drum kit in the photo. But going to the music store and seeing, all the brand. I remember the first time I saw a brand new DW pedal, like the early days. And of course, I used to buy my Modern Drummers remember when Modern Drummer was, in the early 80s, it was a brand new magazine. It was super thick because it was the only magazine you had. But that place was so important to me. And I would go there and get, drumsticks all the time and drum heads and whatnot. But what happened was, I had spent my time there, and I knew the owner and I knew all the people working there, but I didn't take lessons at that store. Of course, I took private lessons, and they had an ad in the paper one day that said, Drums Unlimited looking for teachers, drum teachers. So I already knew those guys, but I came down one day on my own and said, hey, Carrie Allen, the owner, I said, I'm here for the teaching job. And Carrie goes, but Brent, you're 15. And I said, yep, I'm here to teach. And now I've been taking all these lessons for 5 years, and I felt confident and I was ready to give back to the way my teachers had, given me all this education. So I got to thank Carrie. At 15, he said, all right, I'm going to throw you, on to some lessons. And I got a chance to teach and give back at 15. And around that time I was, I was still in junior high, and I was starting to play, not just with my friends in the neighborhood, but getting a chance to play early on in places where, you could actually go to see a band and get paid almost, like bars and all those the forgotten, in Canada, there was so many places to play. Like, there was bars everywhere and live bands. Again, Winnipeg was a cold climate place. There was just live music everywhere. So I got to play my first gigs before I was even 16. My parents would drive me to the gigs, and I would go play clubs, and I was teaching, and I didn't have a driver's license yet. So after school, I would have to take a bus, 2 buses downtown Winnipeg, to go to this other part of town to go teach. Now, this is, again, I didn't know I was going to be inspired by Dom Famularo, who's already taught a bunch of lessons this morning. But back when I was 15, I was getting that type of lifestyle in place.
So powerful.
Kids were hanging out, at 7-Eleven and doing whatever teenagers do. And I was heading down after school to go teach and then playing gigs at night. And by the time I was 16, I kind of felt like, well, I have this, these two little things going on, as well as trying to be a kid. But all of that played into, and then getting to play, it's a long answer, I'm sorry. Getting to play clubs, going across Canada with bigger bands, and probably the most influential band that I got to be in at the time was a band from the prairies. And the band was sort of based not exclusively in Winnipeg, but in Saskatchewan as well, which is the province next over. But the band is called Street Heart. And Street Heart had, some of the best musicians around. And I can just tell you, drummer-wise, the original drummer from Street Heart, who later on also had another huge successful band, is Matt Furnett from the band Loverboy.
Loverboy, great drummer, yeah.
He's one of my favorite meat and potatoes 2 and 4,
Great guy.
Awesome. And so I got to play in a version of Street Heart with the singer Kenny Shields. So that was kind of like playing with my heroes, my hometown heroes, as an early 20s, kid. So I had done that for several years, going across Canada. And by the way, actually, after Matt started Loverboy and not being in Street Heart, my other favorite drummer, Bob Ego, was the next drummer in Street Heart. And Bob lives now in Las Vegas. And it's still great because here we are years later, and I loved Bob growing up as a kid, and now we're dear friends here in Las Vegas. But anyway, so again, the long story gets longer, but Kenny, the lead singer from Street Heart, was he kept pushing me and saying, hey, Brent, because I probably was, mentioning about, I think I'm going to check out Toronto. I'm going to check out Vancouver. I kept having my eye on, going to another big city and just, trying to get some other opportunities, stay with Street Heart, but go to the big city. In Canada, the big cities are Toronto and Vancouver. You don't even think about going to New York. Yeah. I mean, you're lucky enough to be, you can go to New York. I couldn't. That was a crossing the border situation. But at 25, I decided I'm going to go to the NAMM show. And anyone who's watching, so well, Dom, how important NAMM, National Association of Music Merchants trade show in California is. So many musicians, so many great influences, all in one building, the entire music industry. So I went to NAMM, first time in LA, in January 96. That changed my life. Going to NAMM, that's where I saw you the first time. That's where I saw all the drummers and the people that I read in magazines that I thought, I would only read about them, but to see them all in one place, huge influence. So the NAMM show was sort of my start to getting, to my move. And there's a little bit more to the story, but yeah, NAMM show, go to LA, change of scenery. What a ballsy, stupid move for some kid from Winnipeg, but it was the most important.
Well, it's what's amazing about the NAMM show, which is it happens in January out in Anaheim, California, and it's wonderful weather always in California. But for myself in New York, I loved going to it because we'd leave the snow in New York and go out to Anaheim and enjoy the beautiful weather. But I've been going to NAMM for about 45 years now, and going back to the late 70s. And what's amazing about it is that it really kind of gives the networking of what's happening. So now you make the move to LA. Now, this is before, any kind of social media or networking was happening. You've got to network on your own, and you've got to meet people now and start to survive and make it happen. How did that all work out?
Well, that's the trick. The networking and who you know and who knows you is everything. So you better have some chops. I mean, thankfully, as I explained, having some lessons and some stage experience and a lot of chance to play with different musicians and get all that, into your whole momentum that hopefully gets you an opportunity to keep playing and meet other musicians. So when you go to LA as a kid from Winnipeg and they're like, well, you're just some guy from Canada. We haven't heard of the bands you played with before. You have to find a way to knock on doors and hold your own in a big, bad new city, let alone another country. And a lot of people do it. And I was inspired by other drummers who I knew from, sort of in the Canadian scene that went to the PIT, MIT, Percussive Institute. That was a big deal too, to hear about guys from my town. Oh my God, that guy moved to LA and he's going to school in Hollywood. Those were, again, most important things to do, and see guys around me that could leave town. And I had good parents. They were kind of like, well, we're not musicians per se. My parents are musical, but they're not in the music business. They're supportive, but they don't know how to navigate for me and say, well, okay, you want to move to LA. All they can be is a supportive team behind me, but I had to do this on my own. And it's scary to go, but that's the ultimate. You get out of that comfort zone, and that's sort of what, that's where we learn the most, I guess, right, Dom, is, stretching the boundaries.
That's what's impressive, Brent, is the fact that you went out there. Not only is it a different city, it's a different freaking country. So you made that kind of commitment. That was driven by passion. You were just hell bent on wanting to learn and meet people, and that's really passion driven, dedication at the highest level. But you meet up with Bruce Kulick and John Corabi. Now that and I know Bruce. That's a whole nother. How did you make that connection?
NAMM. Again. All those opportunities in one building. If you're just walking around NAMM and enjoying looking at all the amazing gear, well, that's fine. But it's all about the people that are also enjoying the gear as well, and the networking that you can, it's all in one place. And by the way, I just want to comment. So the photo I can see right there it's Tommy Lee, it's myself, and this is 1987. So I'm 17, and you could see, if you can, I'm wearing a Drums Unlimited shirt.
Yes.
And Tommy, we're both wearing our fringe leather jackets. It's very 1987. Anyway, that moment, I was working for the store, teaching and whatnot, but they used to send me to the arena and help out when bands would come into town, because they knew I would love and the networking. Hey, Brent, Tommy Lee's people called. They need some drum heads. Do you have any free time? Would you want to go down to the arena and drop some stuff off? Well, what's my answer going to be? Of course, I'm going to, walk in the back door to the arena and get to bump into some of my heroes. So a lot of those things that happened in Winnipeg, I continually go back to the well and remember that, I kind of learned a lot of these networking skills in the small town, because if you don't learn them, you don't get out of the small little city into the bigger pool of opportunity. So again, I'm always Winnipeg. I'm always small town, but I have to put on the big shoes and the big hat of, getting to a better networking situation. So NAMM was where I met Bruce, and, through another musician, a girl I had worked with in Canada, she kind of introduced me. I met Bruce at NAMM, but she also introduced me to a possible recording and performing situation with Bruce. And again, it's all recommendations. I don't know that Bruce is looking for an opportunity to, and then one day, I'm in a studio situation with Bruce. And interestingly enough, when we first met, I came down to the studio and I was sort of in piano mode. There was a piano there, and I said, hey, if you want me to play piano on some stuff, I'm happy to. So he didn't even know I was a drummer. He thought I was a piano player, which I am. I always tell people I'm a piano player first. So, musician that plays like a drummer that plays like a piano player.
Interesting.
So, and then early on when I got to LA, I was just networking, and one of my dear friends who I played with in Winnipeg, who was originally from California. We don't have to go into that story, but again, great opportunities and networking up the wazoo. And so I had just started some studio stuff with Bruce. And then I said, hey, by the way, Bruce, I'm playing at the Roxy next week with a girl that's from Duran Duran and Soul to Soul. And it's a pop gig, and come on down. And he was like, okay, sure. And we had just become like, we were acquaintances, not really close friends. And so Bruce comes down to the gig at the Roxy, and I didn't tell him I was on drums though. So he saw the gig and he goes, Brent, I didn't know where to look on stage. Where were you? I go, well, yeah, I was on drums. He goes, well, I didn't know you played drums. Well, you do now. So, and then we started to work on some songs that him and John Corabi, because Bruce had just come out of Kiss when Kiss was going on their reunion tour with the Makeup, and John Corabi had been in Motley Crue for several years. Ironically, I've worked with Vince Neil from Motley Crue and John Corabi, both singers.
Incredible.
And I've worked with, there's Vince and I. Yeah, that's in my hometown, Winnipeg. You always wear the Winnipeg Jets jersey when you go back to your hometown. But working with Bruce and John, they were working on these new songs together. And they didn't, again, John saw me play piano and I was like, oh, if you need me to play drums, I can. And they didn't really know I was a drummer. And I love to keep people guessing. I want people to understand that as a musician, my abilities on melody instruments and drums, it's not so much limiting. And again, that's part of my just coming from that small town. Like, we had to learn to sing. You got to learn to sing on stage. You got to learn to, look good and carry yourself well, keep your gear in order. All these little things, Dom, like to keep you in the music business. It's tough.
They're not so little either. Those are serious skills to learn, to understand on how to be a professional at that level in front of that many people.
I mean, yeah, you have to be able to step up. So a lot of it's learned from, back in the day. And then when you get the opportunity in a big city like LA to play with people you really respect. I mean, I grew up being very influenced by Kiss and Motley Crue and a lot of those bands that I had, their records and posters on my wall. So I would know those kind of guys. Those are the guys I would want to work with in a band when I moved to California. And hopefully, I mean, why do they want to work with who's this nobody from Winnipeg? You got to earn your keep, and hold your own musically and know, how to that's where it matters. So all the stuff I did in Winnipeg mattered to a certain point, but then you move to LA and then it's a different game. So I just welcome all that. That's what I've been doing even so that was in the late 90s when I got to work with Bruce and John. And since then I've played with a whole bunch of other great artists just from opportunity of recommendations and getting to, so I don't know that someone's looking for a drummer. And then one day you get a phone call. They go, hey, so-and-so recommended you. Like the Vince Neil gig, they called me because they were looking for someone to play piano as well as drums. Now that kind of like limits a lot of the talent pool in Los Angeles. Well, there's a lot of great drummers who, Tommy Lee's such a fantastic drummer. Who wouldn't want to play those great songs? But, and you have to be able to play piano. Well, that shortens the list. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's serious. So learning a second instrument is I try and make it a requirement with all my students to learn some piano or guitar or bass, whatever. Just learn a melodic instrument just so you have that feel musically of theory and understanding of composition. That's very important.
Yeah, I always just say it's your language, to be able to speak. You don't have to be a lead singer, but to be able to communicate with your voice. Because I remember when I was also taking piano lessons and I went through the Royal Conservatory of Music in Canada, which they also taught you all kinds of rudiments for music. And so that included, when you were studying scales, like I studied piano as a classical instrument, learning from the classical greats, Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Chopin, and all that stuff. But I'm not just talking about the music, but learning the rudimental parts of music and understanding, and what I would learn. I had a private teacher in my 20s that was my piano teacher, and he actually pushed me to the next level. And we got into all this stuff where you're singing with your voice, and you start, instead of singing a scale, from the root to the 12th note or whatever, you're singing the scale, but you would start on the second note, and it would be a minor an augmented minor chord or something. This is crazy stuff, but I was getting into that because I thought it would get my speaking language up of music. Because when you get into environments with other musicians and you learn to write songs and you understand music as the drummer, and you're obviously required to be providing the rhythm part of the song, but without the melody and how the other instruments are put together and not understanding, I always felt like, well, how would I know how to make the right beats for a song if I wasn't also understanding the whole chemical makeup of a song melody wise? So, it all kind of is. I always play less is more, and I think that's because I understand the melody side of more than anything, and I'm more worried about, well, if the chorus and the song has great melody and songs that we all sing, and sticks in our head, the drum parts are going to complement that too, and hopefully not overstep some of the melodies. Now there's rules broken all the time. I mean, one of my favorite bands of all time is Rush and Neil Peart, and those guys have, pushed the envelope for melody and musicianship. But you know what I'm saying? At least, and those guys know their instruments very well. So, and very, very inspiring. But
absolutely, that's so great. But what's amazing about it is that in the course of time, as you're doing all this here, then where'd the connection with Slash come in?
It's a recommendation. Yeah, it's like, I don't know that phone call is going to happen. And in the process of being in LA for many years and playing with a bunch of different artists, and Alice Cooper was part of, one of those. I had played in the mid 2000s with Alice and Slash are friends, and I don't even know for sure, but someone and several people had recommended, and it could have been Alice or somebody that said, when Slash was, putting a new band together, and, he's going to ask around, there wasn't a formal audition process. I've never really done a cattle call. More than not, it's more I've got the random phone call. Hey, Slash is looking for a drummer. And, I've found out that, several people threw my name into the hat. So, and I might not even know who those people are, but probably all the other gigs I did, got me on a short list. And that's the fast. I tell people, I don't know how you can bottle that up and put it out there, but having people know who you are and everything you've done previously, every gig you've done on stage matters, and every performance and every person you've met, and hopefully you've left a good impression. I mean, when I look back at some of these photos and some of these crowds, I think about all the time I did, and we all do. You think about those club days early on and how you were thinking about getting to the next level. And everything's a step, and everything's a building process, and meeting people, and always keeping your, a good attitude. And I'm always listening and learning with my ears. You don't always have to be practicing all day long, but the absorbing of music and inspirations. I mean, how great is it that we have the internet? I mean, I've watched all the videos, Dom, that you've done. I've had a year of pandemic. We've all had. And, I'm completely inspired. I didn't even have to be on a drum kit, but I've been watching online all this great stuff to get me fired up about music, just like everybody else. So, just being a continual sponge. And so Slash calls you because you've been recommended, and I, and then I better be able to deliver when he's, looking for a drummer.
That's the key, to deliver. Steven Adler, Matt Sorum, these guys have laid down some groundwork. When you're with Slash, there are some signature parts that I'm sure Slash wants to hear. You got to be prepared when you hit the ground running. You got to know what you're doing on that stage.
Yeah, and I really take pride in, as a drummer, there's going to be, especially if you're going to do a gig, that if you wrote the songs and you start a new band with your friends or with whatever group of musicians, and it's your template of drumming and you can put your stamp on it, that's one way of interpreting. But when you have a bunch of other drummers previously before you, and your job as the drummer is to complement and be very aware that, you want to have your influence yourself playing your style, because my style is a bunch of drummers that I grew up with, influenced by, and, into my DNA. But if I'm going to play with Slash, I better know Steven Adler, and I better know Matt Sorum, and be really respectful of how those guys made the great music that came before me. And I would expect that a guy like Slash, who's absolute legend, would expect to feel comfortable and have a drummer and other musicians with him that would understand and just sort of support hey Brent, please give me a stick. Yeah, a Vater stick. Just to be, again, know what, to have the pleasure to play on. That's my band Toque. We can talk about that in a little bit too.
Yeah.
Just to be respectful of the music that's already been played. And when people come to a show, and your job as the drummer is to honor those great songs that, Sweet Child of Mine is a fantastic song on its own, but, play the drum part the way it was written. I don't really change a lot because that's kind of the way I grew up. When I studied music as a kid, I sat around listening to Rush records, and we've all done it, right? Where you sit around and you played headphones and I'd put the vinyl on and every day after school, try to get as close to the way Neil Peart did it. And that's what I do on the gig now. It's like, it's not my license and my right to go and change the songs. So I'm respectful.
Well, good for you. Hey, I'm still trying to do that with Neil. Neil lives in everybody's heart and mind and just continues to be an influence today. Yeah, there it is, man. Oh, man. Look at that. To Brent, happy drumming. That is beautiful.
The greatest drummer ever.
Now talk about Toque.
Well, what I love is after all these years of being in a million bands and in my, I'm not a 20-year-old kid anymore, but I didn't get to be successful with kids in my neighborhood, teenage kids, start a band when you're young and ride into the sunset with that band for the rest of your life. I mean, in some good ways, I had played with a lot of different characters and a lot of great musicians and of all different styles. And after all these years of being around the planet a million times, all my good friends from back in Canada, my home, in Winnipeg and in the prairies, we call them the prairie provinces. There's been a couple other musicians that I knew that went through the same experience that I did, which the band Toque, which is named after, it's a Canadian reference. It's a hat. You can see we're wearing toques in the photo. Some of us are wearing toques, and anyway, the band is it's kind of like, this is the band of all my buddies that I grew up with as a kid. Now, everyone in the band, and it's Todd Kearns, who's from Saskatchewan, that I play with Slash with. We're lucky enough, Slash has two guys from the prairies, to Canadian prairie kids in his band. And then our guitar player is Corey Churko, who's from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And Corey is Shania Twain's musical director, guitar player, has been with her pretty much from day one. Mm-hmm. And, he lives in California. He sort of did the same thing I did. He came from the small town, was a very passionate guy, and ended up in California and has had all these great, gigs and toured around the world. And our drummer, now I'm the bass player in Toque. Our drummer, Shane, he's a much better drummer than I am. But I watched Shane in the late 80s with his touring band, his club band. We all had, cover bands, club bands in the late 80s, and we all knew each other, but we were in different bands. We all ended up down in the States and getting, a chance to play with our heroes. Shane has played with Michael Schenker and Yngwie Malmsteen. Shane went down to PIT. So he was one of those guys I was in awe of because he left. He went to California. And Shane's from like Alberta. So anyway, Toque is like, we all got together as guys. We've known each other all our lives, but we've all had these different gigs. Todd and I play with Slash, and we said, yeah, we should do some fun Canadian only music that we grew up on. Nice. And we should do it. And we initially started as a charity band. We'd do charity events, give all our money away and go have a good time. And then eventually we were like, we should make a record. We should cover all our favorite tunes. And it's turned into, people love it. And it's clearly bringing back a lot of memories for other people our age and a lot of younger kids who didn't know all that Canadian music. So we're kind of waving a Canadian flag. We're all guys in the States. We're wearing our influences on our sleeves of Loverboy, like I said, Matt Fournette and Rush, and great classic Canadian and the Guess Who and all that. So Toque is my favorite band right now because I do it on the side. I play with Slash. I've played with so many other great artists, and we do Toque for fun. We hopefully get together, and our schedules permitting. And I was playing with Gene Simmons. There's a photo. Again, having and growing up as such a huge Kiss fan. And getting a chance, you see, what's interesting is, okay, that's Gene and I in Japan. I was playing with Gene as a solo band, Gene Simmons band from, I don't know, 2017 for a couple of years. But what's interesting playing with Slash and Gene Simmons, and you mentioned earlier Brad Whitford from Aerosmith, and a lot of these legends who are from big bands, not playing in the actual band itself is interesting too. So not playing in Guns N' Roses with Slash and I make brand new music in our band together, but it's not a Guns N' Roses band. We have a chance to play all new music and write all new songs together, and it's sort of like a different thing, and it's kind of very satisfying to write brand new music with Slash, and obviously the whole, the big, Slash having such a huge name in Guns N' Roses, but yet we have this other great band where we get to play brand new music as well, and playing in Gene's band, there's no pressure of being in Kiss. I'm in Gene's solo band, so, and again, then I can play with 5 different artists at the same time, and again, I love that challenge of different styles of music, different set lists. Oh my gosh, Dom, when I'm like doing gigs all the time and I got 30 songs to learn here, and then I do a fly date with another artist and you got to learn another 30. Oh, and that's in Japan. I remember playing with Alice Cooper and I had no rehearsals, and they sent me over to Perth, Australia. It was my first stop. I'm flying by myself. I leave from California, and you get thrown into the show, and you better be good. You better be able to nail the gig. And my best friend Eric Singer was on the gig for many years playing with Alice Cooper, but he was going back to Kiss. Now, Eric and I have a long history as drummer friends, as you and I are friends, and us drummers are all, I don't know, what is it? We don't compete. We love each other, and we seem to share and it's a different community, I will say, being drummers.
Incredible amount of respect. There really is. It really is fantastic. And the key thing about it is you're playing with all these different bands. In your hand, you've got to hold those Vater sticks. You use the MV10. Just talk about the sticks that are in your hand when you're playing. Yeah, now we're talking.
Hey, I was on a session last night, and so here's last night's sticks. I've been using the grip tape. I sometimes sort of change up grip tape or no grip tape, but what's awesome about the MV10s is I used to play a stick that was like a 2B. Basically, that's been my go-to. A good, reliable, big, thick shaft. And 16 long. But what I was looking for with Vater, which was incredible, and I remember when Chad Brandolini had shown me a bunch of sticks. He sent me over 10 different sticks. There's Chad. Yeah, I was having a hard time for years and years finding a stick where I could do all these gigs, meaning I could play a giant outdoor festival, huge crowd, and have a thick stick that wasn't gonna, break or just make me feel, I'm a nervous guy. I don't want the sticks to break in the, in the opening song. You hit the bell and so the great thing was this MV10 is a tiny bit, it's just a little thinner than a 2B, but by a very small amount, and it's a little bit longer. And what I do is when I play with like the Guess Who, so there's one of my fill-in gigs, is I get a call randomly once in a while from my hometown heroes. Hey, Brent, can you come in on tour for a couple shows? And again, I'm required to just come in and nail the gig, no rehearsals. Now, I've been filling in for the Guess Who for probably about 10 years now. And one of my best friends, Gary Peterson, the drummer, is one of my heroes. But Gary is, I'm 51. Gary's, probably 70s. And I'm so inspired that he's still out on the road touring. But every once in a while, if there's a fill-in. So what's cool is without the grip tape, this stick is a little more subtle, and I can be really dynamic with the Guess Who. That's a gig that's all about dynamics. And so when you play with Slash and it's more arena sized and that, then the stick is still perfect. So I just love that I found this stick that kind of works. I don't have to switch to a thinner, smaller stick, and I can do like almost from jazz to hard rock. It kind of works. I've turned it on to a lot of other people, and again, it's a longer stick, and I'm a tall guy, so I like a bit more length, and so this is just my go-to choice. But I love it.
Well, it's quite obvious that you are active at what you're doing, but I got to tell you something, Brent. I'm so impressed with your passion and your passion for not only performing, your passion for learning, and just your general passion for education. This is such an important thing, and that's what Vater stands for in the bigger picture, about supporting education and supporting the growth of this instrument and teaching this next generation to go out there and play music because you love it. You are the best role model for that motto for sure, man. You're out there doing it. And for that, we thank you so much. You've done fantastic today.
I appreciate it. And can I really quick, we have to shout out to our good friend, because Dom, you've been to my hometown many times and inspired a lot of drummers, but you also are very connected to one of our dear friends, Dave Schneider.
Great guy.
Best educators there. And we got to, Dave has molded so many great drummers in Winnipeg as another drum teacher and educator. And I'm just going to say, Dom, it's so great to talk to you, and you are such an influence on, and everybody. You got to go to all the YouTube previous, Vater things. There's so many great conversations, and yeah. Do it.
Really is great. Well, I tell you, you mentioned Dave Schneider, the music seller. He's such a phenomenal person. He's a great educator. He's such a great wave maker in the drumming industry. All the many festivals he's put on in Winnipeg, so he's really brought some life there. So it's great that you mentioned him, because he's really good people. But you really have done it. There must be something in the Winnipeg water that produces great people and great musicians. Because I'll tell you something, I'm pretty impressed with all of you guys.
I appreciate it, Dom. But on our license plate, it says "Friendly Manitoba." That's the word, friendly. So we are predisposed. We have no choice. If you meet an unfriendly Manitoban, you better give them shit, because we are some pretty nice people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brent Fitz. You are absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much on behalf of the Vater family. You've done great. Stay well. And hopefully at some point I'll see you in the future.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you in Vegas or at NAMM soon enough.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Boy, it's so great. Brent Fitz, what a phenomenal person and player and educator, and just an incredible dedicated spirit to our art form. Leave it to Vater to come by here and connect us all. This is incredible. From my studio throughout the world, we bring these people in. It's so much fun. Thank you all for joining us from all around the world, from people, Artemy Corps in Moscow. We've got people all around the world that have joined us here. Thank you so much. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.